Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm excited to see everybody joining us today. So as you come in, you will see a poll on your screen. If you can take a second to fill it out, that would be great. And we'll get started in just a minute to allow for more people to get signed in. And while we wait, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Madison Burnett. I'm a BCBA and I lead our professional development program, and I'll be supporting throughout the webinar today. In addition to that role, I work alongside other BCBAs on a clinician-led recruitment team, and I support in the effort of recruiting quality professionals to join our team. Excuse me. If you are interested in joining MPG, please indicate so in the post-webinar survey at the end of this webinar, or you can email careers@manhattanpsychologygroup.com. All right. I am going to end the survey now so we can get started with this morning's presentation. Or I'm sorry, I'm going to end the survey now so we get started with today's presentation. All right, we do have a lot of returning attendees, but quite a few new ones, so welcome everyone. All right, and before we begin, I would like to tell you a little bit about Manhattan Psychology Group. So we were established in 2011, and we've continued to grow our team consisting of skilled adult and child psychologists, neuropsychologists, behavior analysts, special educators, licensed social workers, and behavior interventionists. Dorrie, if you could flip on to the next slide, that would be great. As a team, we are committed to wraparound care, which includes our wide range of services from mental health and testing to ABA and educational services. This holistic approach allows us to address various needs and challenges with compassion and care. We provide services to clients out of our Upper West Side and Long Island City offices, in home, school, and clinic-based settings, as well as through telehealth. Our team is committed to serving individuals, couples, and families of all ages in diverse settings. We're also pleased to offer these free monthly webinars for parents and professionals, where we will continue to learn and foster meaningful connections. Our vision at MPG is to create a future where individuals and their families feel supported, connected, and empowered. And our mission is to provide a multidisciplinary, integrated support for individuals and their families who experience mental health, behavioral, and educational challenges. All right, on the next slide, you will see some housekeeping information. For those seeking CEs for this presentation, you will need to attend in its entirety with a minimum of 50 cumulative minutes in order to receive a link for the post-webinar survey. We'll be verifying your attendance by viewing the time attended logged in Zoom and send an email containing the link for the post-webinar survey. As of January 1st, we have started charging a nominal fee for the continuing education certificate. This webinar is still free to attend, but will be $2.50 to obtain a BACB CEU certificate and $5 to obtain a contact hour certificate for New York State licensed social workers. Today, the chat will be closed, but please post any questions you have in the Q&A so we can make sure that they are seen. I will also be sharing our email for you to have just in case you do have any additional questions. All right, and now I would love to introduce our presenter today. Dorrie Barbanel is a New York State licensed clinical social worker, a New Jersey State licensed master social worker, and a board-certified behavior analyst. Dorrie is especially passionate about providing clinical therapy to children and adolescents with special needs. She believes that all children are capable of learning and loves catering her approach to the individual needs of each child she meets. Her practice integrates her social work and behavior analytic background by meeting children where they are and then guiding them to excel through the use of behavioral principles, playfulness, and a genuine appreciation of the uniqueness of each child. And now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Dorrie.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm Dorrie, and I'm a behavior therapist. I've been working with special needs families for almost 20 years now. Today, I'm going to be talking with you about parenting children with special needs. In many ways, parenting a child with special needs involves the same foundational skills as parenting a neurotypical child, but the intensity is dialed up. The stakes are often higher, the strategies need to be more consistent, and the emotional and logistical demands can be significantly greater. The goal of the presentation today is to offer practical, evidence-based strategies that feel sustainable in a family's life. We're not aiming for perfection or an idealized version of parenting, but really looking at techniques that can be maintained over time, especially in families who are already navigating high levels of stress. So today we'll explore adaptable parenting approaches that are useful for children with diverse developmental profiles. While the focus today is going to be on children with special needs, a lot of these tools can be applied broadly and flexibly across a range of child temperaments. So, if you're a family or you're serving a family who has a special needs child and a neurotypical child or a mix of some sort, the content today will apply to the whole family. We'll be looking at both proactive and reactive strategies. These are things that help prevent meltdowns or problem behaviors before they happened. And we're also going to look at ways to respond calmly and effectively when problem behaviors do happen. We'll look at parenting strategies that are especially useful for children with special needs, but again, can apply to neurotypical children as well. So, as most of you probably know, parenting is one of the most meaningful and rewarding experiences life has to offer, but it's also really hard. And that's true for every parent, regardless of their children's needs. If your child has developmental, emotional, or behavioral challenges, those challenges can be magnified. Every kid at some point is going to test a parent's limits. It's part of their job developmentally. They need to explore boundaries and figure out how the world works. But when those moments stack up, especially in the context of special needs, parenting can get really overwhelming. And when parents lose their cool, as we all do at times, everyone loses. Kids don't learn well from us when we're dysregulated, and we're often left feeling guilty or defeated afterward. And that's why it's important to talk about calibrating our expectations to match what a child is actually capable of in the moment. A great example of this is the research from 0 to 3, which found that many parents overestimate what children can realistically do. For example, if you're expecting a toddler to resist temptation, like not touching something they've been told not to touch, when that kind of impulse control simply hasn't developed yet, that mismatch between expectations and actual ability is what we call the expectation gap. And when that gap is wide, frustration builds on both sides for parents and for children. So, a big part of setting your family up for success is managing your expectations, which offers the opportunity for co regulation. Co regulation is the process by which adults help children to manage their emotions, not by giving them instructions, but by sharing their calm. It's the idea that children learn regulation through relationship. When a parent stays steady, grounded, and emotionally available, their child is more likely to follow suit. Even if a kid is dysregulated, the adult's calm nervous system becomes a kind of anchor to them. So, yes, while it's hard to stay calm when you're constantly frustrated, the good news is that calm is contagious. When you're regulated, your child is more likely to regulate too. What a lot of people don't realize is that not only are expectations that are too high unrealistic, but they can have significant problematic consequences, both for your child and for you as a parent. When we set demands that are too high for a child's current abilities, it can lead to stress, anxiety, and feelings of inadequacy. Over time, this creates a negative feedback loop where the child feels like they're constantly failing, and this damages their self esteem, hinders their emotional and academic development. So, oftentimes, parents feel like, okay, if I set the bar here, my child will rise. But what actually happens is this knocks your child down. When children struggle to meet expectations they can't realistically achieve, it leads to heightened conflict, increased emotional dysregulation, and it strains your relationships. None of this helps our kiddos to get where they need to go. On the other hand, meeting your child where they are and setting realistic expectations for your individual child leads to much more success than pushing too hard or too fast. When expectations match your child's personal developmental stage and abilities, it increases their sense of competence and motivation. It helps them feel successful and it builds their confidence to tackle challenges. This is important for all kids, but it's even more important for special needs kids. Oftentimes, kids with special needs notice they're different from their peers. They can see that maybe their peers stay calm more easily, or maybe reading is easier for their peers, or something physical is easier. They notice it and they feel uncomfortable. The comorbidity of special needs and anxiety or depression or self esteem issues is unfortunately very high. So, by prioritizing appropriate expectations, you have an opportunity to protect your child's mental health and your relationship with them. By assessing where your child is, rather than comparing them to others or to a rigid timeline, you set them up for growth, not frustration or disappointment. Kids are also much more likely to be cooperative and compliant with you when we meet them where they are. This isn't to say that you need to avoid challenges altogether. You just want to be really intentional about setting achievable goals that support emotional regulation and development. Okay, now that we've discussed how important it is to adjust our expectations to meet our kids where they are, it's time to recognize that those expectations still need to be paired with strategies that actually work. It's not enough to just have realistic expectations if we don't have the right tools to get our kids doing what they need to do. One of the key challenges in working with kids who have special needs is that they often don't experience the same natural reinforcers for new or difficult tasks as neurotypical kids. What does that mean? When a child learns a new skill, let's say they finally tie their shoes or complete a homework assignment, the natural reward for that might be something simple, like the internal satisfaction of getting something right, or praise from their parents or teachers. For neurotypical kids, these types of reinforcement are often automatic and immediate, and this helps them feel motivated to repeat this behavior. But when we're looking at kids who have special needs, these natural reinforcers aren't always available, or they might not be motivating in the same way. For these kids, the behavior might be so challenging and require so much effort that for them, the immediate satisfaction either doesn't feel achievable or the reward of a job well done, whether it's a high five or acknowledgement, just isn't powerful enough to justify the effort they have to put in. In other words, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So let's talk a little bit more about the balance between effort and reward here because it's crucial when we're shaping any behavior. Is learning a new or difficult skill worth their while? All kids, especially those with special needs, face what's called a response cost when they're tackling a task. If the effort feels greater than the reward, they're less likely to engage, as anyone would be. This is understandable and more likely to be a consistent issue for kids with developmental challenges. Take a child with ADHD, for example. They may be asked to read a book for 10 minutes. But the frustration of not being able to maintain focus for that long could overshadow any sense of accomplishment. Similarly, a child on the autism spectrum might not fully grasp the social rewards, like praise from peers or teachers, that often motivate other kids. Without those immediate reinforcers, these kids might not be as motivated to repeat behaviors, and this can make learning new or difficult skills even more challenging. And it's not just about the reinforcers or rewards that they're missing. The demands placed on these children are often more difficult for us as adults to follow through with. Let's say you have a child on the autism spectrum and they need 100 learning opportunities to label an animal, whereas a neurotypical kid only needs 10. The kid on the autism spectrum might only get 2 or 3 opportunities because it's more work for parents or teachers to get them to try. So how do we solve for this? They need 100 learning opportunities. They're only getting 2 or 3. We need to adjust the environment to tip the balance in their favor. This isn't bribery, it's strategic reinforcement. And over time, it can be faded as kids build skills and confidence. Children with special needs often have fewer natural learning opportunities, even though they typically need more practice than their neurotypical peers. Rewards can help bridge that gap by motivating kids to engage in the hard stuff and making it easier for parents to present the demand. So, I'm going to give an example. Let's say we have Naomi and she has a short attention span and visual spatial delays. She struggles with cleaning up and is getting scolded at school for not helping. For her, this task is harder than it is for her peers, so she understandably avoids it, and the skill gap widens. She's not practicing, everybody else is improving, she's staying where she is. Her family starts offering a sticker every time she puts something away. Once she earns enough stickers, they all go out for ice cream. The reinforcement gives her a reason to engage with this difficult skill until it becomes more routine. Then it's not difficult and she doesn't mind practicing as much. Okay, so we've adjusted our expectations, and our expectations are appropriate. We're meeting our kids where they are. Amazing. But maybe where they are is writing on the walls, or refusing to do their homework, or something else that isn't setting them or us up for success. Now it's time to apply behavioral techniques. The first thing to remember is that every behavior, whether it's a good behavior or what we think of as a bad behavior, is happening for a reason. If you've noticed that your child keeps doing something, that means there's something maintaining that behavior, even if it's not immediately obvious to you. Kids do not repeat a behavior if there isn't some kind of reward, even if to you it looks like a negative consequence. The first step in effective behavior management is understanding what is reinforcing or maintaining the behavior. Once you can identify why the behavior is happening, you can move into proactive and reactive techniques to help manage it. When we're talking about why behaviors are happening, behaviorists often refer to the 4 A's that maintain behaviors. Those are access, avoidance, attention, and automatic. And we're going to talk about all of them. Access is one of the most common reasons behind kids' behavior. What we mean by access is that the child wants to get something. Maybe it's a specific toy, an activity, a snack, a preferred adult, or even just a routine that feels familiar and comfortable. This is especially common with kids on the spectrum. The behavior we see, whether it's positive or negative, is a strategy they're using to gain access to what they want. Now, that might look like a child asking politely for a turn or using a learned communication strategy. Or it might look like yelling, grabbing, whining, or even something more intense like aggression. Here are a few real life examples from my practice. Zoe is shopping with her parents. She starts whining loudly because she sees a candy bar she wants. Her parents start to feel embarrassed by the noise and they want it to stop. So they give her the candy. From Zoe's perspective, this is a big win. She wanted candy, she whined, she got candy. That whining behavior just got reinforced. Then there's Max. Max is used to his mom handling bedtime, but tonight someone else is trying to give her a break. Max doesn't like the switch, so he screams and bangs his head against the wall. Eventually, his mom steps in and takes over. Now, Max has learned that these behaviors can get mom to come back. Again, access. But not all access seeking behavior is challenging. Owen wants a turn with the monster truck. He walks over and he asks nicely. He's still motivated by access. He wants the toy, but he's using a behavior we'd like to see more of. So the function, the reason behind the behavior, is the same across all of these examples. What differs is how skillfully or appropriately the child is trying to get what they want. And that is something that we can teach and support. Next, and possibly the function behind most behaviors we see, is attention. Attention-seeking behavior happens when a kid is trying to get someone to notice them or engage with them. That someone might be a parent, a sibling, a peer, or a teacher. It could be anybody. It could be a stranger. The key is that the child is looking for some kind of social response. That could be a kind word, eye contact, physical touch, or even a reaction that seems negative, like being scolded or yelled at or told to stop. It can even be something as subtle as eye contact. It's easy to think of attention as something positive, like praise or affection or a high five. But from a behavioral standpoint, any response can serve as attention, even if that response is irritation, frustration, or yelling. If a behavior reliably gets any reaction from someone, the child may continue using it to meet that social need. Let's look at some more examples from my practice. Mom is on the phone. Dev starts whining and shouting. Mom tries to stay calm and tells Dev to wait, but he keeps escalating. Finally, she loses her patience, hangs up the phone, and yells at him. Now, even though the final reaction may have appeared negative to mom because she was angry and it wasn't necessarily a pleasant interaction, Dev still got what he wanted. He got his mom's attention. From his perspective, the behavior was effective. We can take Shoshana. Shoshana shrieks out of the blue, and mom flinches and covers her ears. That's a big visible reaction. If Shoshana is looking for any kind of acknowledgement, that dramatic response might reinforce the shrieking. We can look at Theo. Theo says, "Excuse me, can we talk about my day now?" Same function. He's seeking attention. But the difference is that he's using a socially appropriate and effective behavior to get his need met. What ties all of these examples together is that each child is looking for connection. The behaviors are different, but the function, which is attention, is the same. And once we understand that, we can work on replacement behaviors and start teaching more effective, more appropriate ways to get that need met. The third function we're going to talk about is avoidance. Sometimes this is referred to as escape. This is when a child behaves in a certain way to get out of doing something that they don't want to do. They can also behave in a way that delays a task, softens a task, reduces it, or avoids it altogether. Avoidance behaviors can show up in subtle ways, like stalling or changing the subject, acting like you can't hear, or in more obvious ways, like arguing, shutting down completely, running away, leaving the room. And just like with the other functions, if the behavior leads to the demand being removed or delayed, the behavior gets reinforced and we see it happen again and again. Here are some examples. Andrew's mom reminds him to do his homework. Instead of complying or even saying no, Andrew deflects. He says something sharp like, "You're aging poorly." That kicks off a long conversation about respectful language and boundaries. But what happened to the homework? It's off the table, at least for now. The assignment got delayed, and Andrew succeeded in avoiding it. Then there's Ella. Her dad reminds her, "Hey, last time you took corners that fast on your bike, you fell." And she slows down. This is also avoidance, but it's a helpful kind. She hears the prompt and she adjusts her behavior to avoid a negative consequence. She's still motivated by escape, but this time she's escaping injury, and that's adaptive. And we can look at Jake. Jake's grandma asks him to set the table. Suddenly, Jake has to use the bathroom. This is a little tricky because maybe he really does have to use the bathroom. But if this is happening every time there's a task, it's worth asking whether the bathroom trip is functioning as a delay tactic to avoid a non-preferred task. Avoidance isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's clever, sometimes it's reflexive or subtle, but when it consistently helps kids get out of or delay something they don't want to do, it becomes a reinforced pattern. And just like with the other functions, the goal is to recognize what the child is trying to escape and help them build better strategies for handling those moments. The last of the four A's we'll cover is automatic, which can also be called sensory behaviors or stimming behaviors. This is when a child's behavior is not aimed at getting something from another person. It's not exclusively about attention, access, or escape, although stimming behaviors can also result in feeding these functions. Instead, the behavior itself is the reward. It's not socially mediated, and it might happen when a kiddo is alone. It feels good. It calms the child or helps them regulate in some way. The reinforcement is built in. This often makes automatic behaviors the hardest ones to change because they're harder to replace or replicate. Automatic behaviors can be rhythmic, repetitive, or sensitive or sensory in nature. And they're often misunderstood because they don't seem connected to anything external. I'm going to give you a few examples. Willow rocks back and forth throughout the day. She's not doing it to get someone's attention or to avoid a task, although it might serve those functions as well. It's soothing. That movement might be helping her self regulate or even stimulating her in a way that helps her stay grounded. Sammy flaps his hands, especially when he's excited. Again, it's not for someone else's benefit. It's how his body expresses and processes that emotion. It's a form of sensory input that may help him release energy or manage big feelings. And Clara is constantly humming. No one else is involved, and she's not trying to get out of anything or get a reaction. The humming might help her focus, calm her nervous system, or simply feel good. These behaviors often make other people, especially adults, uncomfortable because they're unexpected or maybe they violate social norms. But when we understand that these actions serve an internal regulating function, we can respond more thoughtfully. Sometimes automatic behaviors are harmless or even helpful. Other times, they could be disruptive or interfere with learning, and we can work on shaping them or teaching alternative strategies, but only after recognizing and understanding their purpose. The key with automatic behavior is remembering that it's not about us. It's about what the child's body or brain is trying to do for itself. So, once we've identified the function or the reason behind a behavior, we don't have to be stuck with that behavior. That's the empowering part. We can actually use that information to change behavior by teaching and reinforcing something that's more appropriate. One really helpful strategy for this is called teaching the positive opposite. The positive opposite is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of focusing on stopping the behavior we don't want, we identify and actively teach the behavior we do want, which, when that behavior increases, has to reduce the behavior we don't want to see because they're incompatible with each other. Then we make sure that behavior gets reinforced. Let's go back to one of the earlier examples. Zoe was at the grocery store whining loudly for candy. Her parents were embarrassed. They just wanted the noise to stop, so they gave in and bought the candy. Now, that behavior, loud whining, is being maintained by access to candy. So, what's the positive opposite of loud whining? The positive opposite of loud whining is asking nicely. Instead of focusing on stopping the whining, we teach Zoe how to use a calm voice and polite language to ask for what she wants. And we stop reinforcing the whining. That means even if it's awkward or embarrassing or uncomfortable for us as parents or providers, we do not give the candy in response to the whining, no matter how loud it gets. But the moment Zoe does use her words calmly, even if it's just a small attempt, we're going to jump in with enthusiastic and behavior specific praise. I love how nicely you asked. Thanks for using such a calm voice. That was great manners. And if she asks really nicely, we may consider giving her the candy. Now let's look at another example. Max, who screams and bangs his head when someone other than mom tries to do bedtime. His behavior is being maintained by access to mom. He is trying to get her back in the room. Instead of just trying to stop the screaming and the head banging, we ask, what's the positive opposite? In this case, it might be something like using a picture card or a simple phrase like, I want mom, or even just being cooperative with the new bedtime routine and staying calm. We want to teach him that there's a more effective way to communicate his preference, or, depending on the plan, that staying calm leads to connection and comfort, even if mom isn't the one doing bedtime. Once Max uses that calm strategy, we enforce it right away. Maybe he earns an extra bedtime story, a few extra minutes of cuddles, or just a lot of warm, specific praise. Thank you for using your words. Thanks for having a safe body. You did a great job staying calm tonight. This shift where we're focusing on what to build, not just what to stop, is what makes positive opposites work. It helps the child learn what works and gives them tools they can use across different situations. Now we can apply the positive opposite strategy with attention seeking behavior. We have our example from before. Shoshana shrieks, and her mom, understandably, flinches and covers her ears. Even though mom isn't saying anything or directly addressing the shrieking, her reaction is still reinforcing. Shoshana sees that her behavior is getting a response, and that's enough to get her to keep doing it. Now, this in particular can be really hard to avoid. Parents are human. If a sound physically hurts or startles you, it's natural to have a reaction. But if we want to reduce this behavior, we have to stop giving it the payoff, even if it's an unintentional one. So, what could mom do instead? If she knows she's sensitive to loud noises, or if she's been paying attention and she notices that Shoshana tends to shriek during specific activities or times of day, maybe it's transitions, when she's excited or frustrated, mom can plan ahead. That might mean wearing noise canceling headphones proactively, or calmly putting them on in the moment without making eye contact, reacting, or giving any additional attention. Once the shrieking is no longer producing a noticeable response, it will start to lose its power. But just like with Zoe, we're not just ignoring, we're actively reinforcing something better. So, what is the positive opposite of shrieking? Speaking in a calm, appropriate tone. Mom can look for natural opportunities throughout the day to catch Shoshana being good and notice and respond warmly when Shoshana is using a quiet voice or expressing herself calmly. When we talk about catching our kids being good, this requires a conscious effort from parents. It's really easy when things are going well to say, everything's calm, I'm not going to mess with it, I'm going to leave it and keep the peace. But when we ignore our kids being good, they don't get an opportunity to realize that we appreciate that. So when you catch Shoshana being good and using an appropriate level of voice, maybe you rub her back, make eye contact, and say something like, I love how gently you're talking right now, or thank you for using such a calm voice. I love listening to you when you speak like that. Let's talk about one more. Dev whines and shouts while mom is on the phone. At first, she tries to ask him to wait, but eventually she loses patience and yells back. Now Dev has her full attention, even if it's negative attention. His behavior was reinforced. So, what's the positive opposite of whining and shouting for attention? Asking politely and waiting briefly. Mom might need to prep Dev before a call, giving him a signal or a timer so he knows when she will be available to give him attention again. Then, when he uses a quiet voice or waits even for a few seconds, she can immediately follow up after the call with behavior specific praise. You did such a great job waiting while I finished. That was really respectful. Or even a little special time together as a reward. Again, we're not just ignoring what we don't like, we're building the behaviors we do want. This allows kids to be successful and functional and get their needs met. What about avoidance behaviors? Let's go back to that scenario where Andrew's mom reminds him to do his homework and he responds by saying something hurtful, like she's aging poorly. Naturally, mom doesn't like hearing this. She launches into a discussion about respectful language, likely thinking she's teaching an important lesson. But let's zoom out for a second and look at what's really happening behaviorally. Andrew used disrespectful language. What did he get in return? A long interaction with mom, and more importantly, a delay or complete avoidance of doing his homework. So even though mom's intention was to correct the behavior, the consequence ended up reinforcing it. Andrew may have just learned if I say something provocative, I can get out of doing something I don't want to do. And bonus points, I get a whole lot of emotional attention while I'm at it. So, as parents, what do we do instead? It doesn't really feel okay to ignore this kind of disrespect, but we also can't teach him that this is the way to avoid homework. First, we're going to identify the positive opposite of disrespectful language using respectful language. And we're going to identify the positive opposite of avoiding homework, complying with the task, even when you don't feel like it. In the moment, we want to avoid giving extra fuel to the disrespect. That might sound like calmly and without reacting to the insult. You have 15 math problems and need to read a chapter of this book. Which one will you start with? Or maybe you guys have talked about respectful language before and you have set clear expectations already and you've explained what the consequences were going to be ahead of time. Then it might look like disrespectful language breaks our house rules. You've lost 15 minutes of iPad time. Now, here's your math homework. In either case, we are not escalating here. We don't dive into a lecture. We stay calm and keep the focus on the task at hand. Then, the moment Andrew starts his homework or uses respectful language, we jump in with our specific reinforcement. Thanks for getting started right away. That shows real responsibility. I appreciate the respectful tone you're using right now. Mom might also offer a small extra incentive, maybe 5 more minutes of screen time for showing those positive behaviors. So, again, the takeaway is this: when we reinforce the behaviors we want, respectful tone, task follow through, and stop giving big reactions to the behaviors we don't want to see, we start to shift the whole pattern. And for savvy kids, especially, this is crucial because if they learn that emotional intensity gets them control or escape, they're going to keep doing it. But if they learn that calm, respectful behavior is what gets them results, that's when things can start to change for the better. Okay. Now we're going to talk about automatic behaviors, which are a little bit different from the other three functions we've covered. These behaviors aren't necessarily about getting something specific like attention, access, or avoiding a demand. They often happen because your kiddo has learned them as a way to manage emotions or sensory input. Your kids you might see kids blinking really hard, making unusual finger movements, maybe close to their eyes, or picking at things. And while these behaviors can look different or even weird to someone who doesn't understand them, they actually serve an important function for the child who is engaging in them. So, why are these behaviors happening? First, they can be a form of self soothing. The child might be using the behavior to calm themselves down when they're anxious or overwhelmed. Second, these behaviors can help manage sensory needs. Maybe the kid is trying to get or avoid certain sensory experiences, like the need for movement or sound or tactile stimulation. Or sometimes these behaviors just happen because they've become part of the child's routine or coping mechanism. They don't have to be about avoiding something or getting attention. It's just their way of managing their world. It's also really important to address the issue of stigma here. Parents often understandably worry about how these behaviors might look to others, especially if they're noticeable in public or at school. And yes, some of these behaviors might seem out of place to other people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad or unnecessary. These behaviors are usually serving a purpose for the child who's engaging in them, whether it's calming them, helping them feel secure, or meeting a sensory need. That being said, there are times when automatic behaviors need to be adjusted, especially if they could cause harm or cross boundaries. For example, if a child's stimming behavior puts them at risk for injury or affects someone else's safety or well being, we have to intervene. This can happen if your child needs to look at a bright light and they're crossing the street and they can't see cars, or if your child has a tactile need and they see a stranger in corduroy pants and start rubbing their legs. While these behaviors are serving a function, the way that these needs are being met is problematic. And it's important if the behavior is harmless and it's not interfering with the child's or others' well being, there's no reason for us not to allow space for these behaviors because they're fulfilling a function the child needs, and we also need to respect that. So, how do we help? We can redirect the behavior to something more socially acceptable or appropriate if we have the opportunity. We can provide sensory breaks proactively. This could be as simple as offering a quiet space, a fidget tool, a moment to run or jump. Maybe you have a schedule, and every 30 minutes, your child gets a 5-minute sensory break where you can put them somewhere safe and they can engage in whatever they need to engage in. The goal is to understand why the behavior is happening, respect its purpose, and as necessary, guide the child toward healthier alternatives that meet the same need. Okay. So now that we understand the different functions of behavior, we can use our knowledge to take proactive steps to prevent behaviors from happening and also to react in ways that make behaviors less likely to occur again if we don't think they're helpful. Let's look at an example of all of this in action. Laura has ADHD. She's in a regular education classroom with a 504 plan. At school, she's well behaved, compliant, and well liked by her teachers and peers. But at home, every time her math homework is presented, specifically when it's long division, she screams and cries. At first glance, it seems like Laura is just being oppositional, but that doesn't really explain her reaction. Before jumping straight into a solution, we need to take a step back and think about why this is happening. First, we need to ask ourselves, are our expectations appropriate for Laura? Maybe her peers are ready to do this, but different kids develop at a different pace. And is this expectation appropriate for Laura where she is? In this case, Laura's math homework involved long division, but we know that she's still struggling with basic number families. That's a huge red flag. The behavior isn't just about avoiding homework, it's about her ability to complete the task. Laura is trying to communicate something very important. She's in over her head. Her behavior is her way of saying, I can't do this. Now, don't get me wrong, screaming is not the ideal response. But rather than focusing only on the screaming, we need to understand the underlying message of the behavior. Right now, Laura is being set up to fail. The task is too difficult for her, given where she's at in terms of skill development. And that's not fair to her. So, before we try to correct the behavior, we need to first adjust our approach. This might mean advocating for a different assignment that matches her skill level, or breaking the task down into smaller, more manageable chunks. At the same time, we can still work on teaching Laura more appropriate ways to express her frustration so she doesn't resort to screaming in the future. But that starts with honoring the message behind the behavior. She's telling us, I need support. So, while we continue to address the screaming behavior, we also need to address the expectations and adjust the environment to ensure Laura can succeed. Advocacy in this case means advocating for appropriate tasks that align with her abilities. That's how we make sure we're setting her up for success. As a parent, you are your child's first and most important advocate. And as someone who potentially is supporting parents, you may need to be teaching parents how and when to advocate. Parents know their children better than anyone else. So when something doesn't feel right, it's not only okay to speak up, it's absolutely necessary, especially for kids with special needs. Advocacy is about ensuring your child is supported in ways that make sense for them and that they are not being overlooked or misunderstood, which unfortunately can happen a lot with children with special needs. So, of course, they can happen to neurotypical children too. But if we're talking about special needs parenting, this is a skill that's going to be even more important. So, how do you as a parent know when to advocate? When your child isn't getting the support they need at school. If your child isn't getting the help they need, whether academically, socially, or emotionally, it's time to take action. For example, if your child is struggling with schoolwork but isn't receiving accommodations like extra time on tests or modified assignments, request a meeting with the school special education team or 504 coordinator to discuss specific accommodations. If your child is being bullied or excluded, ask for a meeting with the principal to discuss the school's anti bullying policies and how they will ensure your child's inclusion and safety. If you're noticing a mismatch between your child's learning style and the teaching methods being used, ask for an assessment or trial of different strategies like one on one tutoring or sensory breaks during the day. When you notice signs your child is struggling emotionally, socially, or developmentally, if you're seeing signs of emotional or social struggles, this can look like withdrawal, anxiety, difficulty making friends. You don't want to wait to advocate. For example, let's say your kiddo is becoming increasingly withdrawn or anxious. Ask for a school counselor or psychologist to observe and assist in assessing your child's emotional needs. If your child struggles to interact with peers or has difficulty communicating, request an evaluation for social skills training or group therapy to help them build the skills. Keep a journal of behaviors or symptoms you're noticing and bring this information to your pediatrician, your child's therapist, or school counselor to help figure out what steps need to happen and get the support you need. When you feel like your concerns are not being taken seriously by professionals or educators, let's say you've brought up concerns about your child's behavior, emotional state, or development and feel like your input is being minimized or dismissed, then it's time to advocate more assertively. So let's say your child's teacher consistently ignores or downplays your concerns about their academic progress or behavior. You can follow up with a written request for a meeting to discuss specific strategies for support. If you're working with a therapist and you feel like they're not fully listening to your observations or input, you can ask for a more in depth conversation about your concerns. You can say something like, I've noticed this specific behavior, and I'm not sure it's being addressed in the current treatment plan. Can we discuss alternative approaches? When your child is being misunderstood, excluded, or unfairly disciplined, If your child is being punished or excluded for behavior that seems misunderstood, you need to advocate for a different approach. And unfortunately, this is also very common with kids with special needs. Let's say your kid is being sent home or punished for behavior linked to an unmet need. You can request a meeting with the school's behavior specialist to create a plan for understanding and addressing the underlying cause of the behavior. If your child is being disciplined for something outside their control, like maybe your child has ADHD and they can't physically sit as long as the other kids in the class, explain the condition and advocate for more appropriate responses or accommodations. Work with the school or provider to develop a behavior intervention plan that includes positive strategies and clear communication about goals and expectations. If you're ever unsure whether your child's needs are being met, trust your gut. If you feel like something isn't quite right or you're not sure if your child's needs are being fully met, trust your instincts and take action. For example, if you feel like your child isn't thriving in their current setting, you can ask for a formal review of their IEP, which is an individualized education plan, or 504 plan, or request a reevaluation of their needs. Okay. I want to take a few minutes to talk about understanding your child's legal rights. In the United States, there are key laws that protect children with disabilities and ensure that they have access to the support they need to succeed. Here are the major ones to know about. IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is a law that guarantees children with qualifying disabilities have the right to a free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE, in the least restrictive environment, which we abbreviate to LRE. Under IDEA, your child is entitled to an individualized education program, IEP, which is a written plan that outlines specific supports and goals tailored to your child's needs. So, what does that mean for you? If your child qualifies under IDEA, they're entitled to services like speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavioral support. So, if you suspect your child has a learning or developmental disability, you can request an evaluation through your school district, and the school is required to assess your child within a certain time frame. I want to talk about Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act as well. Section 504 ensures that children with disabilities cannot be discriminated against in any program or activity that receives federal funding, and this includes schools. If your child does not qualify for an IEP but still has a diagnosis or a disability, they can be entitled to accommodations through a 504 plan. These accommodations can include things that seem little but make a huge difference for your kid. It might be a little extra time on tests or preferential seating. This is especially important for kids who may not require specialized instruction but still need adjustments to succeed in their learning environment. So, if you think your kid might need accommodations and they don't qualify for an IEP, request a 504 evaluation through the schools. Schools have to provide accommodations based on your kid's needs, even if they don't qualify for a full out IEP. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, is a law that ensures children with disabilities are provided equal access and are not discriminated against in all public spaces, including schools, after school programs, and community events. So, what does that mean for your family? ADA protections go beyond just school services and apply to extracurricular activities and community participation. Your kid cannot be excluded from field trips, sports, or other public programs due to a diagnosis. So, what do? If your child is being excluded or is unable to access public spaces or activities, you have the right to ask for reasonable accommodations under the ADA. Why does all of this matter? If your child needs specialized services like speech therapy, behavior support, classroom accommodations, they can be legally entitled to these under the law. Schools are required to evaluate children who may need services, but you often have to initiate this process yourself as a parent. You don't want to wait for someone to tell you your child qualifies because you can lose a lot of precious time where they could be maximizing their potential. If you think your child might benefit from extra help, ask for an evaluation. If a plan isn't being followed or if you believe your child's needs are not being met, you have the right and obligation to speak up, request meetings, or file complaints if you have to. You can start by requesting an evaluation. If you suspect a learning, behavioral, or developmental challenge, you can reach out to your school district and formally request an evaluation for your child. It's not too hard using the internet to understand the IEP process. You can take some time to read up on it, and you can also talk to other parents who have been through it. Special needs parents tend to be a really supportive tribe, and there's a lot of community groups that are available where people will meet you for coffee and walk you through what to expect. You can also bring support to these meetings. Maybe you're a little daunted by initiating a legal proceeding or asking for something from the school. It can be overwhelming. That's fine. This might not be something that you as a parent have a lot of experience with. You can bring someone with you to these meetings for emotional support. You could bring a partner, a friend, another parent who you know who's been through something similar. It's okay to ask for help here. I want to get a little more specific about local resources and laws because most of us are in New York and New Jersey. And while federal laws like IDEA and Section 504 apply across the whole country, both New York and New Jersey have their own procedures, systems, and tools in place to help parents navigate the special education process. In New York, children are entitled to FAPE under IDEA. That means your child has the right to receive special education services that meet their unique individualized needs, and those services should be delivered in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. In practice, what this looks like is kids with diagnoses should be educated alongside neurotypical peers as much as possible. This is important because they need to see what neurotypical kids are doing as opposed to only being exposed to children who might be functioning at a lower level than they are. We want our kids to emulate behaviors that are going to help them access success, not regress or develop new problems. It's important for us to be integrated as a society. This is also important for neurotypical kids because if you never see a kid who has a diagnosis, you don't necessarily have opportunities to learn to respect them and get along with them. There is something called the Parent's Guide to Special Education, which is a comprehensive guide from the New York State Education Department, and it walks you through the entire special education process, what to expect, how to participate in meetings, what your rights are, how the services are supposed to be delivered. If you haven't already, I recommend downloading or requesting a copy. You also have dispute resolution options via impartial hearings and mediation. If you're in a situation where you disagree with the school's recommendations or you feel like your kid's needs aren't being met, you still have options. You can request mediation, which is a more collaborative problem solving approach, or file for an impartial hearing, which is a more formal legal process. Let's talk about New Jersey for a second. New Jersey has similar protections to New York through both federal and state laws. Under New Jersey Administrative Code 6A14, children have the right to FAPE in the LRE, and you as a parent are a critical part of the team that develops and monitors their IEP. There's a booklet called PRIZE, and that stands for Parental Rights in Special Education, available in New Jersey. It's a good idea to read this. It's provided by the New Jersey Department of Education, and it outlines all of your legal rights, what services your child can qualify for, how to request evaluations, how to handle disagreements. It's written in parent-friendly language, and it's designed to help you feel confident in the IEP process. New Jersey also offers a special education ombudsman, which is a funny word, but this is someone who can help answer questions and guide you through issues related to special education. They're not legal advocates, but they're a great resource if you're stuck or you're not sure where to go next. Okay, so that was a lot of information I just dropped on you. What are some things you can do now? You can start by documenting everything. This is one of the most practical steps you can take. You can keep a folder or digital file where you save emails, meeting notes, report cards, evaluations, and any observations you've made at home. If something was discussed in person or over the phone, you can follow up with an email to create a paper trail. Documentation helps you spot patterns, track progress, and support your requests with concrete evidence. You can ask questions. You don't have to be a special education expert to advocate effectively. You are the expert on your child. It's absolutely appropriate to ask, what does that mean? Can you help explain how this will help my child? If a service is being denied or delayed, ask for the reason in writing. And building relationships. Whenever possible, you want to approach the professional on your child's team as your partner. Build rapport with teachers, therapists, support staff, express appreciation when things go well, and ask for collaboration when challenges show up. A team that communicates openly and respectfully is much more likely to make meaningful progress. Okay. And we also want to involve our children when appropriate. We're teaching our kids, and when we allow them an opportunity to participate in advocating for themselves, they're going to be able to do that when we might not be there. Um, And now that we've covered a lot of the big picture stuff, we talked about managing expectations, functions of behavior, advocacy, legal rights. I want to end with a few general tips and tricks that I found really helpful across a wide range of kids, families, and situations. These are simple little things that don't require major effort or planning, but they can make a huge difference in how kids respond and also how parents feel. First, you want to use direct commands. Kids respond better when they clearly understand what's expected of them. And often, without realizing it, we make our instructions sound optional. For example, we might say, "Can you put your shoes on?" And what we really mean is, "It's time to put your shoes on now." When a child is already feeling resistant or overwhelmed, phrasing things like a question gives them an opportunity to say no, even if that's not what we meant. So instead, be kind but firm. "Please put your shoes on now." Clear, respectful, leaves no confusion. Kids are more likely to follow directions, you're more likely to feel good, and you can avoid conflict. Second, try to keep your language positive. What does that mean? It's easy to get caught up in telling kids what not to do. Don't yell, stop hitting, quit running. But what really helps is flipping that and telling them what to do instead. It's a little bit like the positive opposites we talked about earlier. So instead of saying don't yell, you can say use your inside voice. Instead of saying stop running, try let's use walking feet. This might feel like a really small shift, but it changes the tone of the interaction. It gives kids a path towards success, an opportunity for praise, and it gives you an opportunity to see your child doing something positive instead of always penalizing them for doing something negative. This just creates a better family dynamic. And finally, you want to build in some low demand connection time. This is one of the most powerful tools you can use, especially if things feel hard or tense at home. Try to carve out just 5 minutes a day, seriously, just 5 minutes, where you're with your child and you're not giving them directions, asking questions, or correcting them. Let them lead. Play, color, snuggle, watch what they're doing, and comment on it without asking anything of them. Because kids, and especially kids with special needs, are bombarded with constant demands all day long. Sit down, look at me, follow directions, hurry up, say thank you, use your words. It's exhausting. When you create even a brief space in the day where none of that is happening, you're giving your kid a chance to regulate, reset, and feel safe with you. And that connection pays off when it is time to follow through on harder tasks. So, those are the go to basics: be direct, be positive, build in time to connect without pressure. Thank you so much for taking the time to come to this presentation today. I hope it was helpful for you. It was great meeting all of you. Really meeting you, but it was great connecting with all of you.
Thanks, Dory. I believe we have time for one question. Um, we only have a couple more minutes.
Okay, I'll take a look. What approaches have you found helpful when working with parents who are hesitant or resistant to responding to their child's behavior based on its function? How do you support them in understanding the why behind the behavior and building buy-in for function-based strategies? This is a great question, and I think this is really a psychoeducation question in a lot of places. So you really want to educate like what the function is, and maybe sometimes having parents take ABC data where they see the antecedent to the behavior and the consequence. Seeing that pattern helps. If you're showing them the facts and they're still really struggling with buy-in, I might start exploring what their childhood was maybe like. If there's a piece of treating behaviors based on the function that doesn't resonate to something in their identity, and maybe unpacking that a little bit, because sometimes when we're showing people facts and they're resistant, there's something personal that's getting in the way there.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
I'm
Um,
I see one more question. Are any of these legal rights going to change with this new presidential administration? This is a great question. I wish I had a crystal ball for you. I don't know. Right now, these protections are in place. Like we said, some of these are based on the state, some of them are federal laws. Right now, they are in place. So I would jump on it while you can because unfortunately, we don't know what changes are coming down the pipe.
All right. Well, I think this is perfect timing. This is the end of the webinar. We have reached our limit on time, but thank you, Dory, so much for this very educational presentation for both parents and professionals. And thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions, you can email me directly. I will post our email again in the chat, but this does conclude our presentation today.